Hey, welcome to Moment of Clarity. Welcome to the Moment of Clarity void I'm in. This is what it looks like in my head all of the time. Thank you guys for joining me. Please take a second to share this. Get it out there. Let people know. That would be awesome. I have an incredible guest for you coming up in just a second. Thank you guys for being here. I saw someone wants to nominate me for U.S. House Representative. Do not nominate me. I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to have to go around kissing corporate stooges. That's what they're really kissing. They're not kissing babies. They're mainly kissing corporate lobbyists. That's the kissing the babies is 1%. Kissing corporate lobbyists is 99%. But all right, let's get to this great guest I have. Author and professor Dan Kovalik. He does wonderful work. Some of the titles he's put out: the plot to scapegoat Russia, the plot to attack Iran, the plot to control the world, the plot to overthrow Venezuela. I'm starting to see a theme. And No More War. And they're all excellent books. His latest is called Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. So, please welcome Dan Kovalik.
Hey, Lee. Great to be back. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, Dan. Good to talk to you.
You too.
You getting through the end times all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I always want to know, is whether people are surviving the end times all right. You got your zombie repellent nearby and you're good to go.
One day at a time, man. One day at a time.
So I want to talk about your book. I've loved your previous book. This one had many chapters I loved and some I was confused by, but I know you like a good friendly debate. So
yeah, no, it's great. I figured that that was going to be the case. So
that's I figure you expect. You even say you expect that in the book. So
I do. Yeah, absolutely. So.
But let's start with the parts that I definitely agree on. I myself have been, in a way, a victim of cancel culture. Rather than fully canceled, I've just been suppressed as heavily as possible, accused of being some sort of Russian stooge, as many on the left are, including Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein or what have you. Cancel culture is an oppressive force in our world. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, I see it as a force that represses speech, enforces people to be silent about things they care about and the things that need to be debated and discussed, so we can try to reach possibly some common ground that might move us forward.
Right, and you kind of, I guess maybe the impetus, the catalyst for writing this book was a friend and longtime activist, a friend of yours and longtime activist, Molly Rush, who has done amazing work over the years, and she basically retweeted a meme that seems pretty harmless, but it ultimately got her. It was honestly a rather slight criticism of the Black Lives Matter protests, and it ultimately got her kicked out of her organization and kind of canceled. And so I think probably one of the best points you make in your book is that it seems like we now live in a time where someone can't make a mistake or can't realize that they've said something that people took the wrong way.
Well, absolutely. And that's what concerns me. There's, in terms of the norms on race and gender, those things are ever evolving, right? They change constantly at the speed of sound, really, or at the speed of the internet. And if you're not up on the latest, analysis or the latest jargon, and you say something out of good intentions that people find offensive or claim to find offensive, you can find yourself attacked online. You could find yourself fired from your job or deplatformed. In the case of Molly Rush, the organization she co-founded 50 years ago, the Thomas Merton Center, one of the oldest peace and justice organizations in America, said they would no longer work with her based on one meme. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It sounds like what happened to her is just atrocious. I mean, rather than looking at a person's life work, they looked at one slip up with a meme. And you're talking about how the terminology is ever changing, the views are ever changing in this country, sometimes very fast. And I mean, imagine if Obama, who didn't support gay marriage until the Supreme Court forced him to, said today that he was against gay marriage and just for civil unions.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. Right. He would be cast aside, though he does, there are some people like him that seem to have a kind of a special dispensation, from that criticism, because he did much worse things like, destroy Libya, for example, which no one seems to care about. Yeah.
I want to get to that as well. You have a good chapter about the Democrats. And this is something that I've said a few times, that you can get canceled for, let's say, using the wrong term for someone, or having a criticism of the way Black Lives Matter protests are going about. But it doesn't seem that the Democratic establishment could be or has been canceled in any way for, endlessly bombing people who are not white, which makes them kind of white supremacist wars of choice. So obliterating innocent lives can't get you canceled.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we see that right now with Biden, who, just granted emergency munitions aid to Israel as they're, clobbering Gaza. He won't be held to task by liberals, as far as I can tell. Obama, as we mentioned, destroyed Libya. He also began this genocidal war in Yemen, which very few people talk about, that could kill millions of people, literally millions. Even Samantha Power, who was his ambassador to the UN and is now the head of USAID under Biden, was saying 21 million people are at risk of dying at this war that Obama started, and yet no one seems to care.
Yeah, and it's utterly infuriating, and I think that speaks to something you're saying in the book, which is that it's the way we're using cancel culture, with some exceptions where it is someone accused of rape or something that's being canceled, is mostly, or at least a large percentage of the time, used to stop those on the left from having a platform, from getting their voices out there. Those who are on the real left, not the Democratic establishment.
Right, exactly. And you see this constantly, where people who, advocate for the U.S. to stop intervening in Syria are accused of being Assadists, right? Or people who want to normalize relations with Russia are somehow Putin enablers, like Tulsi Gabbard has been accused of. And this is a very dangerous thing. And this is often, people on the left end of the political spectrum doing this to other people on the left end of the political spectrum, which, the dogma in that spectrum seems to be narrowing quite greatly.
Yeah. The allowable spectrum of thought on our mainstream media. So I guess where you start to lose me is you talk about the tearing down of some of the statues, and at one point you say you talk about those who would tear down history, and it seems, and you mention statues, books, and art in the same sentence, and it seems that to me those seem very different, because while books are, a choice for someone to read it, and that's why I obviously support, or I don't know about obviously, but continue to support, the printing of Mein Kampf. Like I think books can be printed and people can choose or not choose to read them. But with statues, they're in the middle of our towns to represent something. And in fact, most of the Confederate statues were put up decades after the Civil War, as a sign of white supremacy, as a sign of, this is what we model ourselves after. These are our heroes. And I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm named after Robert E. Lee, so I know a little something about this.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. And when you're kind of forcing people in the town to look up to these things and say, this is what we stand for, To me, that's very different than a book that can be chosen to be read or not. It'd be holding someone down and forcing them to read Mein Kampf or something.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think I try in my preface to, first of all, distinguish Confederate statues and Columbus statues from other statues that people were taking down or wanting to take down, like those of Abraham Lincoln, who admitted, I think people have to admit, helped destroy slavery. Karl Marx wrote to him, supported him, and there are people want to take down Lincoln statues because they didn't think he was anti-racist enough. Or an abolitionist statue was taken down during this time. So that's my concern. My concern is this: that one, I think the focus on taking down statues should not be the focus of the left, right? There's other more pressing things. But also, I think that there was almost this orgy of wanting to take down every statue you saw, which is of concern. And also, truthfully, the question is, how are these statues supposed to be taken down? Through a democratic process or whatever, which I think is legitimate. But that's what I was concerned about. And I also was concerned, when you had this January 6th, attack on Congress, which of course I, was against. But at the same time, when people take it on themselves to attack the federal courthouse in Portland, or again, to try to take down the statue of an abolitionist, it's tough for them to get upset because people attack another institution. So I just think people need to be careful about that, because, again, what happens, the thing you take down today will be something that will be taken down that you will oppose. There has to be some means. But again, I think my main point, maybe I didn't get across well, was that I feel like many times the left in this country, at least as of late, focuses on these symbolic victories where you take down a statue, as opposed to real social change, which we need in this country desperately. We need Medicare for all. We need a guaranteed income. We need to stop these wars. And that's what people need to focus on, not taking down a statue, right? I mean, that's my view.
Well, true, but I think both can be done at the same time. And also, in terms of the democratic process to take down a statue, I think we live in a time when many of our systems have simply been captured by right wingers, but also by corporate America. So, technically you could say it should be the democratic process that stops a pipeline. But I strongly support the protesters who have put their bodies in the line to stop pipelines. So there's many times where the democratic process, it doesn't really exist anymore. It's been completely captured and owned by corporate America. So you can't always just point to that. And then, some of the statues being the wrong statues, well, that may be, but that doesn't change my opinion of whether, white supremacists as the gleaming example of what we should and our kids look up to in a town, in the center of town, that one should come down, whether there's an abolitionist in wherever where, some idiots tore it down. I don't know.
Yeah, but what about, like I mentioned, that the mural in San Francisco in this high school created by a communist under FDR that the school board wanted to destroy because it too honestly portrayed slavery and the killing of indigenous people. It was Danny Glover that stepped in and said, well, don't destroy it. If you want to cover it up, do that. I don't want that either. But, there is this thing where, I'm sorry, there is a slippery slope where, things of value are destroyed.
There is also nuance. Yeah. We can have nuance in these debates. I mean, it could be that you're opposed to the mural coming down, but you're for the Confederate generals coming down. I mean, Andrew Pike.
Yeah, but they're the same people who are wanting this. The other thing I'll say, you are right. You are absolutely right.
Andrew Pike, who was one of the statues that came down, was kicked out of the Confederacy for mutilating Union soldiers. So.
And again, I say in the book, like, that's fair game, maybe, but in Columbus, but then it went like it was just this orgy, and then people got upset when they attacked the Capitol. But let me say something else. You are right. You are very right that you can do two things at once. We can multitask. We can take down some statues, and we can protest war. But guess what? By and large, it's not happening, right? For the first time,
I don't think the anti-war protests are not happening because of the statue.
Well, but it is kind of, because the left, to the extent it exists in this country, that's what they're doing. They're not protesting the wars. Not since 2003 we've had a major war demonstration. And I'm not saying it's because they're so busy tearing down statues, but there's something going on where that is the focus. Like, why is that the focus when you have millions of people dying in Yemen? Now, I am happy to see these big demonstrations in support of the Palestinians. That is great. But that's the first kind I've seen really since 2003. So there is something bizarre happening when people.
Well, you and I agree that the anti-war movement has been gutted for a myriad ways, and it definitely needs a strong resurgence. Since you brought up the Palestinian issue, I'll present the question I had about that. So, let's see, where is it? You have a great chapter on the cancellation of. You call it the cancellation of Palestine. The it's filled with great points, and you defend Palestine and people who are critical of Israel, and how you call out those who would cancel them, and you start out by saying another manifestation of the cancel culture is the attack on professors, students, intellectuals, and politicians who advocate on behalf of the Palestinian people. And so then I'm kind of bewildered, or I don't know if you're pranking us or what, that you have Alan Dershowitz on the cover of the blurb on the front of the book. And I don't know. I assume you're aware that, no one has tried harder to cancel those who talk and speak up for Palestinian rights than Alan Dershowitz.
And I agree. I saw
devoted himself to making sure that Norman Finkelstein would not get tenure at DePaul. And I don't. How can you connect?
And I defend Norman Finkelstein in the book. You know that I defend him. Now, here's the thing, and that is one of the first things people ask me about the book. Like, why do you have that blurb? It's like, first of all, so he happens to publish with my publisher, so they were able to get that blurb. Now, I could have said, don't support me, but I find it quite interesting. Look, I'm not supporting him. He's supporting my book. If he wants to support a book that has a whole chapter defending the Palestinian people, and he does it on free speech grounds, then, hey, I think that's great. Part of the whole thing I try to argue in the book is, there's this idea of intellectual or political purity that people are trying to enforce, right, through this cancel culture. No one is perfect, okay? I disagree with many things Dershowitz has done and said, and yet at the same time, I agree with a lot of the things. He has been important in supporting due process and supporting free speech. I just think to totally cast aside people because we disagree on different issues is troubling. And again, I have a chapter defending Palestinians.
Don't you have to have some line for some people where you're like, that person's too disgusting? Like, Dick Cheney said
I guess that's right.
Or...
Although if I had all my books, most of them are against war. If Dick Cheney wanted to say, I think war's bad, hey, I've won, baby. But no, I agree with you. There is this line, but I don't look again on Palestine. Dershowitz and I could not be opposite, but I do respect many of the things he's done over the years. I'm not. I guess for me, I'm not willing to totally cast him aside. The problem would be this, Lee: if I sold out the Palestinians in return for that blurb, if he said, "Hey, I'll support your book only if you badmouth the Palestinians or don't say anything about them," that would be bad, right? I'd be a sellout. But I didn't do that, right? He took the book as it was.
I'm not calling you a sellout. I just think it was.
If he wants to support a book that defends Palestinians, I'm going to say fine. You know,
I think it's a bizarre choice, but you know, whatever you.
But I also have Chris Hedges. I have Chris Hedges and Oliver Stone. I mean, you know, look, we'll see. Maybe that was a bad choice. And again, here's the other thing. I don't know everything. I may be wrong. Maybe that was the wrong choice. I could be convinced that was a wrong choice. We'll see in the fullness of time. I guess with that book, I wanted to just go out on a limb, you know, and because that's the problem with the whole cancel culture is you can't spitball, you know, because if you make a mistake, you're going to be canceled. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to say provocative things. I wanted to have a provocative blurb. I think there's some value in that. I'm a bit of a trickster, to be honest.
Yeah, so I'm going to use the word provocative as you responding, yes, you were pranking us.
Fair enough, Lee. Fair enough.
So to get in a little bit more of the nitty gritty of you know, what should be canceled and what shouldn't, you give an interesting example, which I can relate to, of a friend of yours in high school who drove a Dukes of Hazzard car with a Confederate flag on it. Dukes of Hazzard, obviously famous sitcom that it was still rerunning when I was a kid, so I remember seeing it. And he was black, which is, you know, kind of important to this story, but he liked the car, so he drove the car. And you mentioned that nowadays he would have been expelled for driving the car. And first of all, I obviously wouldn't agree with him being expelled. I think that's wrong. I think that nowadays probably what's more likely is the school would tell him he couldn't park it in the school's parking lot. But I'm wondering, so like I went to, it was called Freeman High School in Richmond, Virginia. When I got there, the mascot was a Confederate rebel holding a Confederate flag. Now, by the time I graduated, they had taken just about everything away from that Confederate rebel. You know, they were no longer called the Confederate Rebels. They were called the Rebels. There was no Confederate flag. There was no Confederate uniform. He was, you know, a football player holding a flag that said Rebels or something. But so I agree with that change, that shift in culture. Would you say that's wrong because it's canceling the mascot?
No, not at all. And believe me, people have also questioned that allusion in my book to that. All I was trying to say, first of all, I try to be anecdotal. I try to talk about things that I know of, that I saw, that I witnessed. No, I'm glad that your school's mascot was changed. I wish mine was. Do you know what my school was called?
No, what?
The Holy Crusaders. Okay, and they had a guy and a horse with a javelin and went around. That's horrible, right? My only point to say, I was just trying to say, like, you know, these things are important, but also you don't cancel an individual for that sort of thing. And it was interesting.
That I agree with.
It is interesting in retrospect that this guy, his name is Hiawatha Francisco, which, first of all, is the most colorful name ever. And he was African American. He drove this car, and I just note that, you know, it adds color to life. It is interesting, and again, he would never do that today. You would not find a Hiawatha Francisco doing that. At the same time, I don't think he hurt anyone by doing it, and he didn't feel hurt by it. So norms change, and again, I'm happy for those things to change, and I don't want to suggest otherwise. But I thought it was an interesting anecdote from my life. Yeah.
Fair enough. You talk about the idea of defund the police and how it had little support among the American population. You say the Cato Institute found that 9 out of 10 Black, white, and Hispanic Americans oppose reducing the number of police officers. But to me, it seemed like you were saying like something such as a demand or a shift in American policy should only be done if 51% of Americans support it. But
no, that wasn't my point. Yeah,
most of these powerful changes don't start out as just being 51% or more are behind it.
No, my point was that the slogan was bad. Because I also point out that the vast majority of Americans want police reform, want judicial reform, want criminal justice reform. But what I was trying to say is it was a terrible slogan. Even African Americans don't support it. Only 33% of African Americans support defund the police. Here's my point. But if you criticize that slogan at that time, and probably even now, you could be canceled because they'd be like, oh, you're a reactionary. No, it's a horrible slogan. And you're right, because people who promoted the slogan would be like, oh, that's not what we mean. We don't want to get rid of all, but we just want to do this, that. Hey, guess what? If you have to explain a political slogan, you've lost. It was a dumb slogan. And why can't I, who go to these protests, and I did go to those protests, why can't I say, this is dumb?
Well, okay.
Let's have a different slogan.
Listen, you and I have already agreed that stopping someone for putting out criticisms is ridiculous and awful. But I would argue that it can help stretch the Overton window, and I think it already has. I don't have any hope or optimism or view that America will defund their police anytime soon, our police. But I think it stretches what people think is possible. Just as if you run around saying legalize marijuana, that's how we've gotten to a place where it has been decriminalized in many states, and medical marijuana is allowable in most states. If you had run around saying medical marijuana, then I think the shift would have been much slower. So it's about stretching the Overton window.
Well, look, that may be true. And again, I think the point we're showing is it's a legitimate debate over that. Mm-hmm. People should not have been canceled because they said, this is an awful slogan. When, again, most people didn't embrace it. At the same time, most people do embrace Medicare for all. Most people do embrace criminal justice reform. Most people do embrace police reform. So could you find a better slogan that might, bring people into the tent rather than putting them out?
But Dan, when you say let's have police reform, then the ruling elite go, all right, here are body cams. Like, there's not really anything done.
Well, possibly, but here's my point. My criticism of the left at this point is that they're not trying to win over hearts and minds. You had people from you mentioned the Dukes of Hazzard. You have people in Hazard, Kentucky, protesting for Black lives. You had people in these small towns, white people in middle America, protesting for Black lives, right? But ultimately, those people don't buy into a lot of these slogans. Why can't you try to reach those people instead of pushing them away? And that's my whole point. I think that the left, I mentioned, thought of this recently, with the Occupy movement in 2012. The slogan was a good one, 99% versus the 1%. The 99% of us who toil for a living, the 1% who own everything. Now,
I remember a lot of people saying kill the bankers too, though.
Well, and that's fine too. Kill them. But here's the point. Now the left doesn't want most of the 99% or half of them because they say, oh, they're deplorables, they're racist, even if they're not, or whatever. That's the problem with this cancel culture. It's pushing people out of the tent rather than trying to bring them in to build real social change. That is my critique.
Well, you and I agree on that point. Cancel culture is absolutely being used to malign and tear apart the left on so many levels. So I definitely agree with that. But there's definitely a lot of nuance in it.
Well, I agree with you on that too. And again, as I say in the book, hey, I might be proven wrong. Maybe I overstated some things, but I think it's important to think about these things, to talk about them, to discuss them. And that's what I want to facilitate. If that's all I did, hey, I did my job.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having this discussion with me. Again, for those who want to grab it, it's called Cancel This Book. And let's hope you don't get canceled because
I probably will. And hey, that's fair. But thank you for having me on. So it's Cancel This Book, the progressive case against cancel culture.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope to talk to you again soon. I know you put out about a book a week, so I look forward to the next interview.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Have a good night.
Cool. That was Dan Kovalik. Thank you guys for taking the time to join me on this. Definitely a good debate to be had, because I think most of you know that you find in terms of cancel culture, it's being used as a weapon largely to crush and malign and separate the left. There's times when it should be used on people such as fucking rapists and shit. But we and you and people out there need to be careful as to how that is used, whether it's used to cancel somebody because they posted one sentence you disagree with. Instead, let's have a discussion about why you disagree with that sentence. I'm sure I haven't said 100% things that everybody watching right now agrees with. All right, guys. Really appreciate being here. Please take a second to share this, let people know. And yeah, keep fighting.